She was born to William and Amelia, and Turnbull was the surname all too familiar. The seventh child is her birth number. Brothers Clement, Noel, and Maurice she can remember. Sisters Annie, Louise, Lillian, and Severina. The twins Mary Estelle and Martha Virginia Ethel were a wonder. In the King Garden Bay Methodist Church she attended school. It is here that she would first learn life's basic rules. Reading, writing, arithmetic, spelling, and geography were the subjects studied, and she was not done, see. One cotton dress she had to wear for the whole week, and not a piece of shoes on her feet. However, she was advised to ignore the name callers, for soon her feet would see her first pair of rubbers. Once a week her hair was combed, laced with strawberry, prickly pear, and coconut oil it shone. Scald milk and bappy she had sometimes for lunch, and sometimes found nothing on which to munch. Some classes were held under a tree, and from the road you could hear the children reciting with glee. The Caribbean islands include Antigua, Barbuda, and Redondo, St. Kitts, Nevis, and Anguilla. The Virgin Islands, Dominica, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, Barbados, and Trinidad, close to South America. From over the hill, Mays, Mount Fortile, and Todman came school children. Mabel and Ina Todman were her closest friends. All now from the earth are cut loose, including her dear friend, Mary Moose. Miss Dinah, Stanley Nibbs, and Olivia Forbes from Seacoast Bay were the teachers of the day. When the teachers came from Antigua and she was tested, it is to the 7th standard she was promoted. This was the highest grade in those times, and after this she must resign. A teenager out in the world to await an uncertain future was a scary thought facing our mother. She remembers a trash house as their first home, and in those days they were not alone. Food was cooked outside on stones, and dishes washed with moran bush outside on a dresser shown. A newer house was later bought from Sonny Henley, the broadsides of which were sailed up in the sea. Although this was an elevation in rank, all the children slept in one room on planks. The houses those days, though basic in design, had tiny creatures which were sometimes on one's mind. Bed bugs from PC lodgings were a plague, and sometimes jumping fleas too would invade. Cases stuffed with silk cotton and arrow was the first softness one felt for a pillow. Grass and banana shags made mattresses. Perhaps a night's rest on these relieved many of life's stresses. There were times when the news came about a gale. No one slept, awaking any fatal tale. If in the night they had to take a sudden flight, heads were tied and sometimes very tight. Out in the world to face a woman had debut. Weeding ground, picking up coal, and tying cane were some of her chores too. Walking to Ross Pat to pick up provisions was not excluded, for these foods for daily subsistence were needed. Hands had to chip in for peas and corn planting. Dare not let Pappy Tumble see you lamenting. Finding coconuts one had to wake early, even if when walking to the big bottle well, one spotted a zombie. Pea soup and man soup were the primary dishes, and one welcomed steamboats with an abundance of fishes. Meat was rarely eaten only when a cow was hanged, and dormant taste buds found another tune and sang. Tall like the cedar of Lebanon, and with a bunch of hair, Esmie was attractive and with a grin from ear to ear. Such beauty did not go unnoticed, and as a teenager, a bun in the oven was noticed. It is now that her life would take a different turn. for the bliss of a carefree youth would never return. She must arise and face the world as a mother. The birth of hard work is ever hers to remember. Sewing baby clothes on hand was a common scene, only relieved when she could borrow Mama's machine. God bless Miss Concy, who many a morning showed her the fine arts of sewing. Now when her first-born master Denzel began to talk, some wondered if he was talking fraud. Her name he was hearing from inside her belly, intended to say Esmie, it came out muddy. So when she had sent Denzel and her nephews to the Big Bottom Well, they came back with a story so swell. Seeing no water, she inquired what was the mystery. They quickly exclaimed, muddy, the water muddy, cementing forever the name Muddy. Her life would quickly now pivot to another scene when the handsome Prince MacDonald Stoutt, nice boy, she viewed on the village green. It was while on a village game of cricket, Prince MacDonald Stoutt found himself as the best wicket. A man with an instinctively natural gift of oration. My father wooed my mother and said it was not infatuation. He told her she could have anything from his cultivation, for he was indeed tired roaming and seeking stabilization. Our mother, naive and very sincere, took comforts in his words chosen with such care. Soon another son was brought into the world, and she called him Prince Alfred. Handsome, witty, number one in the Stoutt clan, he grew to be a stalwart in tilling the land. It would take 2 more boys in my father's life before he proposed and made our mother his wife. So on September 9th, 1952, they were joined in holy matrimony at the Rotong Methodist Church in a proper and fitting ceremony. 4 boys and a husband was hers to take. When asked how she managed, she said, walk for God's sake. From Cane Garden Bay to Ballast Bay, she walked morning and noon, cramping the entire family in one room. Cows, goats, and pigs she kept at Ballast Bay and trekked this journey every day. Boiling popeyes and cutting our coconuts was a daily meal of these hungry snouts. She worked like a man chopping goat and cow pasture to ensure that her family had some of life's pleasures. Waking at the dawn of morn to milk the cows, reaching Ballast Bay by 5 a.m. To this, her children must take a bow. Why succumb to such arduous tasks while others sit on benches and bask? She said, child, you're gonna ask? It was no better way to make $1, and the little ones, I would never like to see them suffer. When our father took employment in Bonnfield, the total management of the household he had to yield. Our mother played the role of father and mother, while others stood by and only wondered. At 4 a.m. she would rouse the biggest boys from their sleep. Through the darkness with flambeau, they could only peep. Taking cows from Ballast Bay to sell to the vessel. Lord, you could imagine the hassle. Take the cows of the small pen and up the paved wharf, then stop down by Harrigan by the big trough. Passing many cows en route to the station. Boys, keep the cows in line before you lose your position. At the station, cows from all parts of Tortola. Lord, I hope they will buy this big fat heifer. When all the cows were sold, walking back home was happiness untold. In 1958 or thereabout, said the ambitious Mr. Prince MacDonald Stoutt, I will build a home to put my family so we all could lie down and be happy. I remember the move very well. Just another one of my stories to tell. My sister Berenice in front and I holding on tight riding on the donkey, guided carefully by our mother Esmie. So down Ballast Bay on the mill round was the chosen spot for the house our father founded. Bringing sand on the donkey to the site, Denzel and Alfred walked with all their might. You could just imagine how laborious this must have been. Husband and wife building a house with 2 young children. MacDonald in front with 3 pieces of board took the lead, and Esmie behind, holding straight indeed. Our mother and Prince Alfred would mix the mortar, and from the pond mouth they got sand, and from the gut water. Where was Denzel anyway? Sometimes he was sickly, she would say. Our mother and father dug the cistern by hand. Sometimes Tommy Blyden and Mr. Dawson too gave a helping hand. Cooking food for workmen every day. Our mother did it because there was no other way. In those days, there was no money to pay a contractor, so many lent a hand and did not falter. Just cook some food and ensure that they are fed. In the end, a proper home you will have instead. Long ago, robust women would breed out their latter, and every 2 years, a child would be added to the number. Miss Esmie, Lord, how much you have now. 5 boys and I don't know how. I wish the Lord will give me a little girl, you see, so she could keep my company. But the prayers of the righteous are ever to God's ears, especially if it is offered with some tears. For indeed, the next one was a girl. They say she was clear, had long hair, and plenty calls. The boys told me they thought she was a dolly, and wouldn't let her foot touch the floor in a hurry. Then 2 more girls came, and our mother said, "This I can't explain." God knows if he had given her girls before, the corrupts would make their hands sore. They would have complained about each bite from stinging nettle when they were chasing after those cattle. Don't talk about the Jack Spaniels down the cliff. You could see them chopping bush without making a riff. Another boy was knocked in between. Then she got 2 more girls and closed that scene. Raising 11 children was no sweet chore. She washed clothes until her hands were sore. Some friends came to help, to which she was grateful. These people she called caring and faithful. It is hard to keep 11 children out of trouble, you see. And in those days, there was no TV. So the children would invent their own games, even if it was learning to spell each other's name. She taught us games like Pinchy Pinchy and Babody, and not forgetting O'Grady. Down in the meadows where the green grass grows, there is Miss Esmie. She stands there alone. Although she stood and sang so sweet, it was hard to keep our mother off her feet. Vehicles were scarce in those days in the BVI, so the children would sit on the porch with a sharp eye. Jeep, 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 bus on Windy Hill. And all the other children joined in with the loudest shrill. With a cold goose, she would iron MacDonald's khaki pants. When she was finished, on its own it could almost dance. When the goose got too hot, she would shut down the damper. And when it was almost out, she would blow in it later. Heating brick oven to bake bread every Saturday. To keep the household in bread, she saw no other way. Boya, shut-up tart, pudding, and titty breads were often some of the weekly spreads. Bleaching, boiling, starching, and ironing clothes were hers to do, some of which she also placed in blue. All the lines raft off with clothes, sometimes walking non-stop without a doze. Grandmother Lizzie, Tonton, and cousin Audrey were grouped among the faithful 3. Younger generation like Clarina and Nettie found some Saturdays to help keep the house tidy. The aunts and uncles from St. Thomas and the mainland Their many boxes could be considered a helping hand. To all this, the children are grateful and label them as among the faithful. When our mother would go to the hospital, someone played her role so pivotal. Our brother Lucian chipped in and lent a helping hand after being healed from the disease of eating sand. Our mother said, God bless Dr. Whalen, saved his life. 6 months he lived in the hospital fighting for his life. A handful of sand or rice he would eat. He didn't care if it came from under his feet. Muddy would go to St. Thomas on occasion, but it was not really to buy the latest fashion. Of course, she would buy the household needs and something for the child that was most in need. Our mother could sew on a singer machine, and at the house now, one could still be seen. Disgusting children would get on her knee when she was sewing, and she had to bounce them to keep them from crying. Has gone to catch Terrence Jeep, she would say, and see the child grinning and holding on tight from the sway. This she had to do to give them little attention before she could complete her fashion creation. She did all this mastery performance because she didn't want her children less than anybody else. To this we were grateful and walk around in glee, especially knowing nobody would laugh after we. My mother had some neighbors for more than 60 years, and they can recall many of her life's tears. Words like children powder, tank crow, B-Max, and Cowan Gate milk to others would seem strange, but they understood their purpose just the same. She remembers the days of Electrolux fridge and oil stove, and in coal pits picking up kush coal. Banner Wispies, Barracu and Corin Dew, and Papa Lolo for Colorloo. With pitch point wood and one match, she can catch a fire and balance a zinc pan on her head with a cutter. She knows how to saddle a donkey and mule and put on its crupper and pummel iron according to cultural rules. Muddy used to toil hard and took care of MacDonald and strengthened him up by giving him cordial. A whole pot bread and a percolator full of tea. Sometimes we were wishing he would have leave some for we. MacDonald had a healthy appetite, you see, and it is 2 plates of food she would put in front of he. One had in the salting and the other the bread kind and thing. She felt that to eat so much was greedy, but he would say, woman, if I dead, let me dead with a full belly. In the early 60s, Muddy gave her life to Christ, trusting always in Jesus to make everything right. She would rise singing, this is the God we adore. Then the children would hear a knock on the door. Get up, don't let the sun rise over your head. But we would have preferred to sleep instead. But those lessons would be beneficial later in life, especially to those who would be somebody's wife. Learn to turn around, she often said, before when you get husband, then knock pantaloons cross your head. So at age 10, the girls had to learn to iron, hem, and sew. Go in the gut, picking hog mangoes and shifting goats too. At the time, we didn't understand the lessons from learning to work. And our mother would say, go and please don't skulk. We had to bring 3 or 4 turns of water from the gut because my father was adding on to the small hut. This was done before we went to school, part of the helping hand rule. Muddy ensured that we attended Sunday school. This was just a mandatory household rule. When you come man and woman, you could do what you want to do. But as long as you are a child in this house, I will tell you what is good for you. We were forbidden to walk and play on Sundays. I now understand she viewed it as God's day. Get your Bible and play cat verses or sing some of your favorite choruses. At 5:30 a.m., the radio would be turned to ZBBI, And I used to wonder why. Then at 7 a.m. to PJD2, Phillipsburg, St. Martin, to keep the spiritual atmosphere flowing. It is from PJD2 my sister Joyce started to sing from the time she was a little thing. Then at 2:30 to WIVB, because at that time there was no TV, you see. When ZBVI was started by Bill and Nellie Greer, this was happiness in the home to hear. You had to be silent when the hometown news was on, and she stated it once with no prolong. She would say, your uncle Lewy now in politics, and he is looking out for all the districts. Our mother was particular about what went into our ears, trying to avoid any later tears. So if the radio was unintentionally turned, and Kamle we go Suki, or Krumpo Boy was discerned, she would quickly say, no Benna in this house. And everyone got quiet at the church mouse. One time my brother Julian, of blessed memory, thought he was bursting out of his skin. From a transistor radio came bellowing, one BG planting. He only saw the double rope raised over his head. He quickly understood who ruled that house instead. She encouraged the children to go to bed early, and in her colloquialism would say, your Zamba ready. She said early to bed and early to rise will make all your children healthy, wealthy, and wise. One never got a chance to play rude, for you will see another side of her which you could term crude. For she would throw some licks in your tail, and she didn't care how you howled and wailed. She would say, you're too redempted and buggering hardin, and don't think she was playing. Those licks never spoiled a child, for one was transformed from redempted to being mild. The younger children and grandchildren were given a your sheep, and this was not for them to later eat. She would sell the lambs from the mother and open a bank book for them later. So Neil, Joyce, Carol, and David had bank books, from which later on a little something they took. So if you find yourself now that you cannot save, don't say you didn't find the way paved. All my life I knew her to be a Methodist, and she never thought about being an Adventist. She would attend church regularly and make sure she was always early. She got involved in all relative church groups, class leader, woman league, and prayer groups. She even was head of a cradle roll, ensuring that the younger one's birthday was retold. Our mother can be termed consistent, you see, because all kinds of food and no trouble to she. She would say, them would do all your eating wouldn't pass my mouth. And this was not because her name happened to be Stoutt. She believed from a long time that eating healthy food is what you should do. So later on in life, the doctors wouldn't have to visit you. So when she said she will not eat crack dinner, don't think she's insulting, just eating proper. Most dogs of the home were called Blackie, although we had one named Shiwi. We had a big brown one like a German Shepherd named Rover. One time I fell on him, he just hollered. The pigs are always called Willie, and all the cats run to Tipsy. All fowls run when they hear cheep, 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 looking for coconut and corn, all 3 of feet. Now this is soursop doesn't fall far from the 3, and this spirit of work in all of we. Each child to his or her own calling, some working tonight from God make morning. I witnessed our mother in solemn and deep grief, when Julian, her 4th born, died in his youth, almost in disbelief. But comfort could now be found in the children now living, that erased the pang and dismal pain of grieving. Our mother practiced a true spirit of Christian living, always visiting the sick and shut in. On Sunday afternoons after church she would start, saying she going to carry them piece of shut up tart. Likewise she knows the art of giving, for many can attest to receiving something when leaving. She always got things struck away in hiding. Don't touch it, because it is for those who came visiting. Now my mother is without her companion, for MacDonald exited and joined the ancestral reunion. Bitter and sweet may be the memories, but she lives in hope for a joyful life in eternity. Now that all the children are grown, she lives a life all of her own. At 90, I heard her say she will stop baking tart, but it seems from that hobby, she couldn't so easily depart. On the days when she attended the Senior Citizen Center, and when acting, she could fill your belly with laughter. She used to still cook her food, baking pudding and tart, making guava berry, adopted traditions of Africa's culinary art. Attaining 99 was no mean feat. I wonder which child would sit comfortably in that seat. I doubt any would be strong enough to raise 11, for I call that a whole heap of children. But perhaps it is to a grandchild we must look, because I already saw my nephew Brent prophesying 7 on Facebook. Today, she has turned 100 and still coherent in her head. Her memory still sharp like a sword, leaving us spellbound by the flow of her words. So this champion 100-year-old Virgin Islander is our mother, fashioned after no other. We are proud to celebrate with her in this way on this her 100th birthday. So in concluding the reflections of our mother, it is to the book of Proverbs I must ponder. Who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. She rises while it is yet night, and gives meat to her household and maidens. Strength and honor are her clothing. She shall rejoice in time to come. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and from her tongue speaks the law of kindness. She pays attention to the ways of her household, and does not eat the bread of idleness. Many women have done virtuously, but in our eyes, Muddy has surpassed them all. And you have seen her children. Behold now her children. God has spared her life to see them as upright citizens. He has also honored her wish to see them grown. Her labor of love and toil was seeds well sown. She has instilled in us a rich spiritual legacy that cannot be taken away so easily. The values instilled in our lives are rooted and firmly grounded, on which the next generation has sprouted. So as she presses on to reach her mother's number, it will be significant, and we will all remember. But we praise God for all that she has done, and pray that resting in his arms, she will always be found. Happy 100th birthday to our mother, Esmie Estene Turnbull Stoutt. And I thank you.